Hi, and thank you for joining us today to learn more about climate. I'm Lucy Noble, and I've dedicated the last 11 years of my career in reducing greenhouse gas emissions by shifting users to more sustainable travel options. Now I want to start to raise awareness about environmental issues and the urgent need to address climate change. I'll be talking to experts in this field and sharing key insights in bite-sized pieces with you. I invite you to join me on this journey to understand and combat climate change, where each episode brings actionable insights and solutions. And today we're talking to Zoe Samuel. Zoe is a venture partner at Starshot Capital. Zoe previously worked at Google, where she co-created Alphabet's largest internal grassroots climate solutions community, Anthropocene, now over 4,000 strong. Zoe also led circularity and climate programs and engagement for gTech, one of the larger divisions at Google, working toward a world without waste. Welcome, Zoe. How are you?
Hi, yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Great. And so tell us, why are you interested in climate and sustainability?
Well, I was originally in showbiz, so hopefully I'm a reassuring case study for people who want to pivot into something green, who don't have a master's in climate science of some sort. And I've always been worried about sustainability. And well, I've always been worried. I grew up on a family farm, and you notice when you grow up in nature, if the flowers come early and if something is changing. And I remember one specific time as a small child with my dad in Scotland, at our cousin's place, and we were on the mountainside, and my dad said one day, because of climate change, this purple heather landscape could become grassland again. As it was, many hundreds of however many millennia ago, and I was outraged because it was perfect. So I thought, you can't change that. And so I went into showbiz because that was my first love, and then I got somewhat diverted, as I suspect we might get into. So now I'm a climate person.
Yeah, my next question was, how did you get into this field?
So I was in theatre mostly, when film and TV, and I got Google slid into my DMs and on LinkedIn, which was really weird because I looked at LinkedIn like maybe every 6 months at that point, because it is really not a useful platform for people in entertainment or really a lot of portfolio style careers. And I got this message saying, hey, we're looking for someone to come and work on the Google Assistant, which at that time had, I think, a couple 100 million users, and which by Google standards is, whatever, but by the standards of a, comedy writer, I basically went to work as a writer on the Google Assistant. And so I went from a situation where 300 people laughing at my jokes is a good night to 100 million people see what you've said. And the assistant has shockingly little oversight for what the writers can put into it. I'm sure that's changed now. I don't know, maybe it has or hasn't, but if I'd ever wanted to get dramatically fired from Google, I could have put something very inappropriate. But and so I arrive at Google, and for some reason, Google is famous for its 20% time thing that people are familiar with, where you can spend up to 8 hours a week working on something that is not your core job. And I don't know why, but I thought this was compulsory and you had to find something like this. So I thought, okay, I'm going to find, there must be climate people here, because I've been worrying about this my whole life, and I had no agency in making, helping it, like, avert it. And I was very anxious, and I think a lot of people experience real grief over climate change, because we can see things changing and how diminished the world might be that we pass on to our children. And so I found this group, Anthropocene, that already existed, but it was a wee slip of a community, and they weren't really doing much yet, but there were some really smart people that would kind of get together and talk about the problem. And me and 4 others, including the original founder, Gordon Brander, sort of decided to become that we would see what we could do with it. Like, can we build this community up? Can we take it to the next level? And it turns out that the skills required to get people to show up on a rainy New York evening to laugh in a theatre are very similar to the skills required to grow a large, successful climate community. And so I had, by the time I helped start this, I had been sort of studying climate change in my spare time, and for about 4 years. And so I came in with pretty good domain knowledge. Like, I wasn't a complete newbie to it, but I certainly, I wasn't a software engineer. I wasn't someone who had been working at a lab, analyzing soil cores or anything like that. And so we started this community that was, on the one hand, about helping people connect to each other and helping them find like-minded people and yet get education. And we wrote all these materials to help people find the right, basically sort of how to climate in 10 minutes a week, an hour a week. And then the other part of it was an organized 20% sort of incubator where we would find good ideas. And whether it was an idea like Project Sunroof that had already been built, but was sort of languishing with very little attention. Or it was an idea like a project called Anthropocene, which I love because it's half Greek and half Hindi, which was about geospatial analysis of that helps farmers in India. And that was a completely grassroots effort. And either way, we would put together a sort of Franken team of 20%ers to get these projects to the point that they could then get funded and get real resources. So now those both have full-time teams, and Sunroof is sort of Google's flagship sustainability product in many ways. And, I don't want to oversell how much of the carbon that they are each capable of reducing belongs to me, so to speak. But I would say anyone who touched any of those projects, they're operating at such large scale that, you can now spend the rest of your life sort of in a plane made of coal, eating steak through a plastic straw, and you'll be pretty much on the right side of climate. So, kind of like bumblebees. People say, how do they fly? No one told them they couldn't. People didn't tell me I couldn't do it, so I just did do it. And then they did start saying you can't do it once Anthropocene got big enough. I also might take a moment and explain the name Anthropocene as well, because I noticed it can raise an eyebrow. So the whole of human civilization has existed in a climate known as the Holocene, which is the last 12,000 years. And the main reason civilization has been able to grow as big as it has is that things like sea levels have been relatively stable in that time. And agriculture was therefore possible because you could predict, like, this is when the monsoon comes and this is roughly how hot it's going to be. And therefore, these are the crops we can grow. We've broken that, and we now live in a climate called the Anthropocene, from the Greek anthropos, people. So this is the climate that people made. And we deliberately named the group a slightly highfalutin name so that we would attract people who were sincerely interested and not just the sort of casual observer, because we wanted people who were willing to commit some time, hopefully, to actually solving the problem. So here I am. I'm no longer at Google, and I'm now at a company called Starshot Capital. And I guess we'll talk more about that shortly.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for that background. And definitely thank you for putting this community together, because I certainly have benefited from it. And
thank you.
Yeah.
After the Google layoff last year, I got a lot of outreach from current or former Googlers who had been somehow involved with Anthropocene. And it's really lovely to see the number of people who either got involved in a climate project or made a full-on switch into a climate career as a result of their involvement, or just had a good time. And that's worth something too as well. I think, like, not everybody who does climate, I think if we make it so that you're like, oh, you're either doing it 50 hours a week or you're not serious, like, we're going to put a lot of people off. So.
Well, it's definitely a great group to be part of. So thank you for that.
It's a really lovely community. Oh, I think that, I mean, the community's members made it work. Like, it was a group of people who really understood we're all here to actually solve the problem, and we're not here to, like, march around and tell anyone else to solve it. We're here to actually move tons of carbon on a massive scale. And I think that, and also people who were just, like, really open to learning and willing to ask potentially stupid questions and humbly learn new things. And also some real experts who very generously gave their time, like people like this fellow Michael Blasnick, who's, like, published all these papers on heat pumps, who was a completely invaluable member, or Ross Koenigstein, who's one of the leading experts on nuclear energy, who's a long time Googler and a wonderful member of that community as well. So.
Yeah, definitely a lot of great members there. Speaking of which, you offer guidance to Zooglers and others looking to pivot into climate work. What kind of advice would you give to professionals seeking to transition from other industries into climate-focused roles?
So I would say there's a couple of ways to think about this. And I'm going to caveat this by saying that nobody should feel judged because they are not financially able or emotionally able or otherwise to leave their current job or to totally retrain for a new career. Like, people have kids, they have an elder relative that needs care, they have mortgages, like they have reasons. And again, if we set the bar that, oh, you have to like do this at the very top level or don't do it at all, we're just going to lose a lot of great people. So I would say the first thing is it's okay to not make a full pivot if you're not in a position to do so yet, or ever. And then I would say there's climate as an industry. Obviously, it affects all industries, but basically there's various sectors within climate, and I think all of them desperately need people who really understand business and how to get stuff done and how to, you know, put steel in the ground and build wind farms and help, you know, to take a metals recycling technology that can work in a lab and scale it so that it's making it so that we don't need to be mining any more rare earth metals in extremely unethical circumstances in Congo. So there's any skill set you have is immediately relevant, and the number of companies within each of the climate sectors is on an exponential, the good hockey stick. The bad hockey stick is trying to fry us all, but the good hockey stick is now such that you can go and get a well-paid job at a company where you're like, hey, I'm a UX person. Well, people need to understand when they're looking at a dashboard for Scope 3 emissions, like, what am I actually looking at and how do I interact with it, and then do something with it. So that's UX. And, you know, they need product managers and they need financial analysis, and like green biz is green biz. And if it's all green and no biz, it doesn't get stuff done. So whatever your skills are, there is a place in one of these companies for you now, and certainly increasingly as, you know, the climate situation gets worse and as these companies mature. So I would say there are communities like Work on Climate that are really great ways to see what some of the founders in the spaces are doing, and to get to know people and see, you know, there's jobs there. And if you're not sure that you have like sufficient domain expertise, you're like, oh, I'm really interested in agriculture, but I don't know anything about agriculture. There's things like TerraDo, that's TERRA.do, who, full disclosure, I don't work there, but they're very nice people and I do want them to succeed, who have a wonderful climate course. And so I think if you're like, oh, I have a really great skill set, but I don't have like that climate credit yet that makes me credible, you know, taking the TerraDo course, or maybe getting involved with a community like Work on Climate, or getting involved if you're a political sort of person with Citizens Climate Lobby or the Environmental Voter Project, can be really great ways to like make yourself credible and get to know people within climate. And because climate is quite new, and also because everyone's there for the right reason, people will want to see you succeed. And so you can reach out and sort of start getting to know folks. There is the other big option. So that's one option, which is like, oh, I'm going to go and have a climate career and I'm going to work for a company like Watershed, or I'm going to work for a company like Mojave Energy Systems, one of our portfolio companies, and I'm going to decarbonize, you know, home heating and cooling for the entire commercial sector, and that's amazing, and it moves a lot of carbon. The other thing is to remember that because everything is affected by climate, if we're talking about, oh yeah, industry and manufacturing, well, if you work in an industry that already exists, like, you can be doing more climate friendly practices. You can be at a company like, pick a Unilever, say, as an example. Sorry, Unilever, I'm speaking to a US audience. How are they sourcing all of their products? Are they sourcing them sustainably? How are they communicating with the green consumer? How is Unilever itself? How does its carbon footprint operate? So, you know, what products is it offering to cater to the fact that people, especially under the age of 45, tend to care greatly? And, you know, what are you doing to make sure that there is no green premium for the products that are the right kind of thing? And who have you connected to other people at that company that also care about this? Because Google is not the only place with an Anthropocene-like group. And it doesn't have to be about activism and potentially getting on the wrong side of management and you know, signing letters and things. It can also be about product and systems and operations, and making sure that you're like, let's say you're making transistors. Are you sourcing your metals from places that you can live with, and also that are geopolitically stable and, you know, part of the circular economy? These are ways that any job can be a climate job. Like, if you're an accountant and you're not currently starting to upskill on all of the tax credits and things like that involved in climate type stuff, you're not going to be a very good accountant in 10 years. So maybe if today you're an expert in that, you're a climate accountant. 10 years from now, if you don't know it, you're just a bad accountant. So I think that any job can be a climate job if you take a step back and look at your workplace and say, how can this system be just this much more green? Because we don't need everybody to like immediately quit their job and go and start building a wind farm. A lot of people are actually already in the place that they need to be. So I'd say that there's the like full on go get a climate job at a climate company and then stay where you are, and be like, hey, I'm going to help Wells Fargo sell green mortgages, or something like that. And we don't have time to burn down the whole system and build a new one. So we are going to have to fix it as we're sort of building the ship as we're sailing it. And those are both perfectly viable, and perhaps these folks over here might have a little less appetite for risk in their personal lives, and good for them.
That's great advice. That's actually how I started. I was in marketing, and then I transitioned into marketing for transportation, and then building programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's, yeah, exactly. Just use your existing skills. You don't have to do it all at once. Yeah.
Right. Like if you were trying to lose 100 pounds, you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to have to lose 90 pounds this week and then 10 pounds next week. You'd be like, okay, I might lose a pound a week for 100 weeks. Like that's,
right. That's the way to go.
In my case, trying to learn to play the piano really well. Like I play for 20 minutes a day because that is what I have time for. If that's what you have time for, do that. Like, don't try and overcommit and then quit or screw up your life in some terrible way and then be like, the climate destroyed my career. No, that's not helpful to anybody.
Right. So for Starshot Capital, you're investing in startups and founders. What kind of people are you looking for? Or what kind of companies are you looking for?
So we are on Fund 1, we're a $35 million fund, and we're investing in early stage companies in 3 climate verticals. So there's the built environment, there's industry and manufacturing, and there's food, land, and agriculture. And the other 2 big ones are energy, mobility, and so that we get the 5. And then there's the half bucket of carbon accounting and removal. So we're staying in these 3. And the reason for that being, they are the most underinvested relative to the potential climate impact. So when you look at agriculture, or when you look at manufacturing or the built environment, for example, steel alone is 8% of the climate problem. Cement alone is 8%. Now, that means either of them on its own is 2.5 times the size of the problem of the whole of the aviation industry. And so if you look at energy and mobility they're still underfunded relative to what the size of the whole pie should be, but they're starting to get to a close point where of the amount of money going in is commensurate with the problem. We are focused on these areas where like agriculture is incredibly hard to decarbonize, but the potential to solve the problem in a really sticky way that like once it's solved, it stays solved and the whole industry becomes more profitable and more stable. That's very exciting to us. So we're looking for early stage companies, pre-seed through Series A, and definitely excited to meet founders who may be watching. So I hope they do get in touch.
Yeah, how should they get in touch with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. And that's probably the best way initially. I do check. Google has taught me, check your LinkedIn. So I do now check it. So I would say start there.
Great. And I'll post your LinkedIn on the comments section so people can find you there. And so to wrap this up, any final advice or call to action for our listeners?
I would say start where you are. If you're not a political person and you're not a scientist, you do not have to march, and you do not have to get a PhD in physics and meteorology or something like that. I would say if you're not ready for it to be your whole career, maybe you make a change in your existing job. If you're not ready for that, or maybe you say, hang on a minute, I'm just going to go to my HOA and encourage them to change the rules so that they don't prohibit putting solar panels on the thing, or I'm going to like see what it would take for everyone in my neighborhood to get a discount so we can all get solar together. Or maybe your kid's school would like to eliminate single-use plastics and you're involved in the PTA. Like start where you are and find a manageable project. That's one thing where you're going to use that as your like learning project. And you may not do an amazing job, and that's okay, but just start with something that's doable. And that maybe involves 3 friends, because if you have some accountability, that makes it a little bit easier, and then some people to share the load. And don't try and do everything, because I think it's important to remember the vast majority of people are now aware that the climate crisis is a really serious thing, and that it's happening in our lifetimes, and that it will be devastating for our children and grandchildren if we don't win this fight. But that means that hundreds of millions of people are now in the fight, and no one has to solve the whole thing on their own.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that advice, and thank you for sharing your expertise. And I hope there are some founders out there or soon to be founders that will be in touch. And to our audience, if there's a particular topic related to climate change that you're passionate or curious about, let me know, comment below. Your input helps shapes our future episodes and ensures that we're covering the issues that matter most to you. And don't forget to subscribe and join us next week for more insightful discussions. Together, let's explore solutions and take action for a healthier planet.